317-67OOIDA. If you have already dialed in, please stay on the line. Live from Exit 24 will start in 4 minutes. Please stay with us. If you'd like to participate, call 317-676-6432. Live from Exit 24 will start in 3 minutes. Call us at 317-67OOIDA to join in the live discussion. Live from Exit 24 will start in 2 minutes. Please hang in there. If you'd like to ask a question, call 317-676-6432. OOIDA's Live from Exit 24 will start in 1 minute. Please stand by or call us at 317-676-6432 to join us.
Welcome, listeners. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Exit 24 is brought to you by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. I'm Norita Taylor, your call screener today. Your host and special guest will join the show shortly. But for now, know that you can take part in today's show by calling with your questions or comments about the topic of discussion, which we'll introduce at the top of the show. The number to call is 317-67-OOIDA. That's 317-676-6432. And now I'll turn it over to your host.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Live from Exit 24. I am your host, Mike Matusik, and I am joined this evening by Bryce Mongeon, Director of Legislative Affairs in OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office, and Lewie, Pugh, OOIDA's Executive Vice President, and someone with the best voice on radio. At least that's what someone has claimed before. So,
I got a t-shirt. I got a t-shirt.
A shirt to prove it,
that
too.
proves it. And thanks to our lovely host, Mike, bought this for me for my birthday because Mike was there the day of the truck show that my good friend George from Bangor, Maine, said that I had the best voice on radio.
He certainly did say that.
So a shout out to my buddy George. I hope you're safe out there and making lots of money.
And Bryce, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Well, real quickly, before we get going, the number to dial in is 317-676-6432. Again, that's 317-676-6432. For anyone that might be listening to this on replay, you can also go to livefromexit24.com, OOIDA's YouTube and Facebook pages, and even podcasts. So this show is on all of that stuff. So if you need more information, you can find it there. Again, want to kind of get into our topic, which is truck parking, something we've covered before. Something that deserves to be talked about a lot, though. And with that, I kind of want to get started. Bryce, you've been on the program a few times. I think truck parking, I think we've talked about misclassification and a couple of other issues. On truck parking, though, can you give us, and I want to start nationally and kind of bring it, narrow it to, more local issues that we see. But nationally, Bryce, and when I say that, I mean in D.C. and Congress, where does truck parking stand? I know there is no dedicated truck parking money, but where did that start and where is it at now?
Yeah, so kind of taking a real big picture and going back a few years, you have Jason's Law, which was enacted and required the Jason's Law report, which took a national inventory of truck parking. And that report from 2014 showed that there is a shortage of truck parking across the country. And more recently, in 2019, they released an updated version of that report. And that showed, unsurprisingly, that there is still a shortage of truck parking in every state, every region of the country. And in fact, some states have fewer public truck parking spaces than they did when they did the first survey. And they also found that the nation's truck parking capacity has not kept pace with the growth in truck vehicle miles traveled. So just very broadly speaking, there's a shortage of truck parking. It's getting worse. And even though right now states can use federal funding to expand truck parking capacity and build out more truck parking spaces, very few have done so. And so that leads us to what you just mentioned is we've been fighting to try and secure dedicated truck parking in any highway bill or infrastructure bill. We have our standalone legislation, H.R. 2187, the Truck Parking Safety Improvement Act. And basically what that legislation would do, set aside funding for a competitive grant program, and that funding would be used exclusively for building out truck parking capacity. So, unfortunately, it hasn't quite gotten over the finish line yet. We've been trying to, like I said, get that in any bill that is moving here in Congress. On the bright side, we do have bipartisan support for this legislation. We have bipartisan co-sponsors who've introduced the bill. That's over in the House. And then over on the Senate more recently, we had a bipartisan duo of senators try and get an amendment included in the infrastructure bill to address truck parking. So we've made some good headway. We've definitely raised the profile of the issue. We've heard about it, talked in about more context as well, and we can probably talk about it a little bit later. Even as supply chain issues with supply chains are being talked about, we're talking about it with that as well. But kind of where it stands now is we've made a lot of progress, but we know that the work isn't done on it. We're still trying to see if we can get over the finish line.
So what's the chances that this would would cross the finish line, or some sort of dedicated funding for truck parking would be signed into law this year or next year in 2022?
Yeah, frustratingly, the chances are pretty low right now. Our best opportunity was to get this included in the bipartisan infrastructure bill. We got pretty close over in the Senate side, but it just didn't make it into the final package. And so, this specific bill, this specific route doesn't look too likely at this moment. But with that said, that doesn't mean we're going to stop trying to get it included in this legislation, or that doesn't mean we're going to, stop trying to raise the profile of the issue and see if there's not ways that funding that's already out there can be used for truck parking. Like I said, there's federal programs right now where this can be used, and if Congress does in fact pass an infrastructure bill, putting billions of new dollars of infrastructure investment in place, we're going to make the argument that this is something that needs to be addressed. So, unfortunately, not as likely as we'd like, but there's still opportunities to expand parking capacity and get some funding for it.
Lewie, you were on the road for 23 years. You know that parking is bad or non-existent in some parts of the country. Most people listening to this, whether live or on that might be recording it or listening to it on YouTube later, probably are people that spend time out on the road. They've struggled with parking as well. So we don't need to debate that. But I guess what's your reaction to what Bryce said about what is being done in D.C. or not being done in terms of dedicated money for truck parking?
Well, I think it's very disappointing on what's not being done. Everybody knows it's an issue. When we talk to a lot of these legislative folks on Capitol Hill, they know it's an issue. They go home from Washington once in a while. They go on vacations with their family. They go places. They see the trucks after dark, lined up on the ramps, and the rest areas overflowing, or lined up on the ramps at the truck stops or wherever. They've admitted they've seen it. I mean, this is pretty much a bipartisan thing. There's really only one organization I know of that's even against it.
That's a good point.
Which is really unheard of in Washington, D.C. But, we have this thing that's bipartisan. Everybody knows it's a problem. FMCSA knows it's a problem. CVSA knows it's a problem. DOT, all the people and our elected officials, everybody admits that this is a problem. It's a tragedy, but again, nobody wants to do anything about it, and which is crazy to me again, because there's only one group that I know of that's against it, and they can't fix it no matter how bad they think. And like this bill that we brought up, this HR 2187, they could even be a part of that if they wanted to be. It gives them opportunity. But with that being said, I'm also disappointed that when I look on that website for this 2187 bill on a congressional website, I don't even know if there's 20 congressmen that's been co-sponsoring this. Do you know, Bryce, how many people are co-sponsoring it this time?
We're at 25 right now.
We're at 25, and I get it. I was a trucker. I know as a trucker we like to complain and moan and groan about our problems, and I did it. We all do it. But we got to pick up the phone, guys. You should be calling your congressman and saying, why aren't you co-sponsoring HR 2187? You get your name on there. I know I got my congressman on there because I called him, and I know you got You know, you guys can talk on the phone and pick up your phone, but pick up your phone. It takes 2 minutes to call in there, get their transportation. Guys say this all the time. If we had 300 or 400 congressmen co-sponsoring it, I believe this would probably pass, or people would start talking about it. So it's kind of on us too, because we're not doing our grassroots due diligence. And I'm probably making some members mad or truckers mad, but it's the truth. We got these problems. We need to pick up the phone. We need to get involved. That's how you change these things. That's how this stuff. That's why all this crap gets dumped on you guys, and all these stupid rules and all these stupid regulations, because the people that are against you drivers, they're picking up the phone. They're having the meetings. They're talking to their elected officials. And correct me if I'm wrong, Mike, you worked in a congressman's office for a good long time.
I don't like to admit that, though, so.
But Gary, it's no big deal for a congressman to co-sponsor a bill, especially something about, is it? I mean, that's a pretty easy thing.
It's a relatively easy ask, yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So and another thing we have to keep in mind, we know that our elected officials that we don't vote for don't really care about our opinion. So with that, especially on state levels, you need to keep in mind, even though you don't have a parking problem around your home, that's where you need to be trying to fix parking. Just like I lived in Ohio, they closed the rest area 25 miles from my house. I went to Columbus and had all these meetings and tried and failed. But, not because I needed those spots, because my brother truckers from other states needed those spots. That's how we're going to get parking around the country, is we as truckers have to start going to these public meetings, getting a hold of our state reps and talking about this. I mean, I think this is where the state trucking associations fail us. They don't care about parking in their state because it's not a problem for their members. It's a problem for their members 3 states over. That's where it's a problem. It was a problem for me in New Jersey. It wasn't a problem for me in Ohio. But that's where I was from, Ohio, so I have to work with the people in Ohio to try to get truck parking for the guys from New Jersey. How about the guy from New Jersey helping try to get me parking from Ohio? So that's my rant.
Well, so let's do this. Bryce, I think most people probably would agree that, at least by D.C. standards, truck parking is relatively bipartisan. As Lewie mentioned, there's really only one group that is opposing it, and we have about 90 seconds before we take our first break. But if it's bipartisan and there's a lot of support for it, why hasn't Congress actually gotten it done yet?
I think there's a couple of reasons. One is just it's competing with a lot of other interests. And I should also say that, I don't believe that any of these are good reasons, but just kind of explaining why. It's competing with a lot of other interests. There's how many 1,000 bills that are introduced every Congress. So it's definitely a good thing that we have bipartisan support and we don't have any really hard opposition to this. But it's still a matter of, like Lewie said, raising the profile of the issue enough to get it over that hump and get it over that threshold so that it does get the attention. And on this issue specifically, I think from both sides of the aisle, especially when you hear some members of Congress talk about a reluctance to kind of like create new programs, or they don't want to, they already think there's enough programs that are going on out there. So there's some hesitancy to add anything new. I think there's some resistance because of that. I think on the Republican side of the aisle, more specifically, you hear about streamlining and not, creating anything that's duplicative. And so I think there's some hesitation from members there. They might view this as, creating something new, creating a new program for federal money. But again, that's where our education efforts come in, making sure that they know that, this isn't new, this is something that's already out there, but we just need to make sure it's addressed.
Bryce, thank you. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we have Jason from Kentucky with a question. And again, the number to dial in is 317-676-6432. Again, take a short break. We'll be right back.
$45. It ain't what it used to be. Today, with OOIDA, it can be worth a whole lot more. A $45 membership helps you save with special pricing from top vendors on equipment, fuel, tires, services, and much more. Plus things the whole family can enjoy, like restaurants and travel. Save hundreds, even thousands. You can't afford not to be a member of OOIDA. Go to OOIDA.com. Your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We're with Lewie Pugh, OOIDA's Executive Vice President, and Bryce Mongeon, Director of Legislative Affairs in OOIDA's Washington, D.C. office, talking about truck parking. And we are going to take our first...
Hey, before you take your
sorry,
call
go
real
ahead,
quick,
Lewie.
I got one thing, a comment that was on Facebook from a Greg, and I won't say your last name, but anyway, Greg just said Congress isn't going to do anything unless you donate to their fat campaign contribution. And I understand how you can feel like that, and we get that. I understand what you're saying, but if, like, Mike, again, I go to you because you've got so much experience, you know, working in Sam Graves' offices and stuff. Let me, you know, is that true? Is that the only way you can get them to do something? Or do they get nervous when a lot of constituents start calling?
Well, look, you know, and I'll let Bryce answer this or address it after me. You know, I don't think campaign contributions will seal the deal on anything. The members of Congress certainly appreciate it. But if it was all about, you know, writing campaign checks, this probably would have been done a long time ago. And the reality is it competes with every, you know, for as many people that would give some politician money for truck parking, there's probably an equal amount of people that would give the same person money to not do anything on truck parking. And I'll just leave it at that. Again, we're going to go to Jason in Kentucky. Jason, if you can hear me, you're on the line. How you doing this evening?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. Sorry to keep you holding there for a few minutes. Go ahead with your question or comment.
I don't know if it's exactly a comment. I had an idea of a more targeted approach on how to deal with bad actors in the industry, both cities that are a major problem in parking and some of the customers that are a major issue. There's always talk of another shutdown. Unfortunately, you know, they don't ever get too much done, and most people can't really afford to take a week off to participate. So I had an idea for a more targeted approach that would be an app where basically the members, preferably all the members of OOIDA and more, could vote, and whoever the worst actor is, instead of not working at all that week, you simply wouldn't go to the worst actor that's the city and the worst customer, just for the week. That way, it's that particular customer's problem instead of, you know, people that aren't doing anything wrong. There's some cities that work with you. There's some customers that work with you. There's others that notoriously do not.
So, in other words, you know, sort of a way to crowdsource which locations are good for parking or bad for parking, kind of the same way that there are apps that you can, you know, download that tell you, you know, it uses people out on the road to tell you if there's a speed trap or an accident up ahead. I mean, is that something similar?
Yes. It basically, if you know that if you go to this city that you're not going to have anywhere that you can legally park, and it's a big issue that after you get done wherever you're going or before you get to where you're going in the morning, you have to park, and you're probably going to get a ticket for parking here. Well, vote on them that week as being the worst city in the country to deal with, and if they get the top vote, simply no one goes there. So that particular city would have to second guess their strategy for truck parking, whether that be should they provide some or should they maybe not ticket people for parking on the ramps, whatever the case may be, so that they're no longer the top city on that list and they're not getting blacklisted from no deliveries coming in, because that's going to hurt their local industry.
I think it's a very interesting idea. I kind of like it. I wonder if it would be more advantageous, maybe, I guess is the word I'm looking for here. If you had some sort of survey or an app or however you want to get, you can figure out how to gain this information. But to more so put this information out publicly and try to get people to pick this up, news people or local news or whatever, you know, city XYZ voted by truckers the worst city in America. Because I think the only problem with your idea, and I'm not trying to shoot it down, is where you say nobody goes there for a week. Because I think that goes kind of back to the same thing you started out with. a lot of guys can't afford to shut down. And if you're a guy and your run is from, Indianapolis to Baltimore every week,
with a good paying load,
with good paying loads, say, and you don't have a parking problem because you can park at your customer or whatever, because we know there's guys out there like that, then I don't think all guys are going to stop going to that city. I get what you're saying, but maybe you use this information more in a public thing, and try to get, the Associated Press and stuff like that to pick up news story saying this city was voted the worst, this city was voted the best. This customer, the Walmart or this grocery warehouse was voted the worst customer ever. And probably right now, in this time of crazy supply chain and shortages, it actually might pick up some traction and get some attention.
Absolutely.
It would definitely take time to gain traction to have a full effect. But like you said, a running list, and that was part of the idea, is you would see, okay, you weren't the worst this week, but you see, hey, I'm only 10 spots down. Maybe we need to think about this and address it. And yes, everybody's not going to quit going to a particular city, but I think it's a lot more realistic to not go to one city in the country as an owner-operator than to shut down for a week in October because maybe we're going to get together, or shut down for maybe a day or two in April because, there's some percentage of people are going to even know that it's going on. That's the big thing is with the different shutdowns, you usually don't even hear about them far enough ahead of time for them to have an effect. This is something that could be built over time that wouldn't hurt you on a huge financial level unless you are on a dedicated route. If you're on a dedicated route, obviously you're not really going to be able to participate if it's your city's turn that week, but everyone else can.
Well, Jason, it's an interesting idea. It gives us something to think about. Really appreciate it. We have to take. We have a couple more callers lined up, so thank you for calling in, for listening. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Do you mind if I give my email? So if anyone would like to help build the app, I could.
Go for it.
J-A-T as in Tom Lyons, Lyons @gmail. JATLyons@gmail.com. Any programmers out there got any ideas for me? Shoot me an email. It's greatly appreciated. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks,
Awesome.
Jay. Be safe.
Thank you. All right, we're going to go to our next question. George from Maine. George, if you can hear me, you are on the line. How you doing this evening?
Good evening. I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
Doing excellent. And the gentleman sitting next to me has a big smile on his face right now.
How you doing, George? How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. It's kind of interesting. I learned something yesterday.
What'd you learn?
From people are famous. One for the movies and one for radio, and we know what you're famous for.
I don't have a face for the movies.
You're not Clark Gable for sure, but you're.
Oh yes, you must have listened to me on the radio, my show last night on the Dan Shay Show.
I did. I rebroadcast, but I'm up here in the Northeast, right?
Yes.
And I run New Jersey and New York, and Lewie, you know what it's like up here. And New Jersey's done a really good job, as best as they can, on the turnpike. And I know that it's the oldest part of the country, so everything's already built up. But there's two things that I would recommend. One is to repeal, I think it was in MAPS, the transportation bill, where states weren't allowed to commercialize rest areas. And Connecticut was in this big push to put all these commercialized rest areas all over the state. And they had to stop doing it because of that part of the law, was my understanding. And I also think that when they build new truck stops, it should be maybe a regulation. And I know everybody hates regulations, but if somebody's going to build a truck stop, maybe there should be a percentage of parking at that truck stop based on how many trucks fuel in an average, say, of 24 hours.
That's a good thought. I like that idea, actually.
And George, on your first, the commercialization issue, I'm going to turn that one over to Bryce. And You are correct, though. There is a federal law that essentially prohibits, putting up more truck parking on the interstates. That, I'm going to turn. Bryce, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's kind of a long-standing prohibition. I know that there's always some talk in Congress from a few members, forward-thinking members, who would like to see that prohibition on commercialization eliminated. Unfortunately, Mike, you kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier. When you talk about some of the interests that have a lot of sway with Congress, I think the operators of truck stops certainly have very good relationships with lawmakers, and they, frankly, they're able to pull a lot of sway on this issue. And also, they don't have a ton of issues that they're working on, and this is something, that is always top of mind for them. So for those reasons, it is difficult to overcome. I know we were appreciative of that during the onset of the pandemic last year. The Federal Highway Administration made some allowances to allow food trucks to operate at rest stops in states, if states wanted to allow it. So, that was kind of a good way, I think, of at least showing that this makes sense and showing that it's a way that, expanding services for truckers can make sense. But you're right. It is something that would make a lot of sense and help to expand parking.
Hey, George. Go ahead, Louis.
And I was going to say, it's interesting, too, because like last year, some states would allow them and some states wouldn't. Here in the great state of Missouri, we at OOIDA tried to get a food truck put at a parking area up the road from us about 10 miles. We wanted to hand out free meals.
Give away food.
To give away food to truckers and allow them a place to stop when this COVID and everything was shut down. And we were told under no circumstances could we do that because that would be commercializing the parking area, rest area, whatever you'd like to call it. We couldn't even give food away.
Hey, George, I have a question. Go ahead, George.
I just want to say this big push too for these larger but truck stops. Now they've done with this paid parking. Now it's a double-edged sword because I do use it, but I only use it when I have to. And I noticed that if there's the smaller truck stops, the smaller size truck stops around, the guys have to fuel there, and then they end up at this big truck stop, and they stop in the middle of the day. They've taken up all the free spaces, and a lot of us that get in there, we put in, $300-400 worth of fuel, well, $500 now, and then we have to pay to park because there is no other spaces.
Remember when it used to be if you bought fuel, you could park at them ones on the East Coast that charged you. If you bought fuel there, they'd spent $25 in their store or whatever, they'd let you park for free. Which that's the way it still should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, you're right.
Well, George, thank you for calling in. I think you made Louie's month. And once he heard your name, he just had this big smile on his face. So, and I got to ask you, George, you've heard Louie on the radio more than once, and you still think he has the best voice on radio?
I do. He has a very. I don't know how to. There's a lot of guys that sound good on the radio. But Lewie has this voice that I've never heard, and I've heard a lot of people. I listen to a lot of radio. There is nobody in the country that sounds like him.
I'm going to start doing commercials. Thanks, George. I love you, buddy. You be safe out there. And,
all right.
And get a load to Kansas City and come visit us.
Louie will buy you lunch.
Hey, I'll buy you a bill of steak.
All right.
George, thank you very much for calling in, George. Really appreciate it. We have about 30 seconds before our next break, so I want to get that number out again to call in. It's 317-676-6432. Again, that's 317-676-6432. When we come back, we're going to talk with James from California about some parking issues out there. And again, for anybody that's listening to this not live, you can go to livefromexit24.com to find more information about the program, or go to OOIDA's Facebook or YouTube pages, and everything should be there. Stay tuned. We'll be back in just a minute.
I'm a dad.
A son.
A husband.
Wife.
I'm a writer.
Photographer.
I farm. I'm a veteran.
I love old cars. Fishing.
My kids.
Chrome. And I am a professional truck driver.
And together we are OOIDA.
OOIDA was founded by truckers to stand up and speak on behalf of truckers. We've done that by combining the individual voices of our members into a single, powerful voice. Protecting your interests, defending your rights.
Join us.
Make your voice heard. Join OOIDA, the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association. Call 1-800-444-5791 or visit OOIDA.com.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We are halfway through our this show, I should say, and before we get too much into some of the other issues, we have another caller lined up, James from California. James, if you can hear me, you are on the line. How you doing this evening?
How you boys doing back there?
We're doing good, thank you. How are you?
Not doing good. I got a kind of a bone to pick with the state of Oregon. I live 20 miles from the Oregon border, right on I-5. And when you go north out of California into Oregon, you get down about the 12-mile marker, they've got a brand new, big, fancy rest area. Beautiful place. Spent millions of dollars on it. When you get close to it, the first sign you see is commercial trucks prohibited. Now, I've been watching for your raspberries, figuring somebody'd pick up on this thing, and nobody said a word about it. And they've also been taking away truck parking in the rest areas and putting RV only. You know, RV only, RV only, RV only. So half the first 4 or 5 slots in the rest area are RV only. I mean, let the RV go to an RV park.
Yeah,
it irritates the bejesus out of me.
And James, you know, it's not something I'm familiar with. We do have a board member that lives in Washington State that I think still runs down into California and back up north weekly. I'll check with him and see if he's familiar with it and what he knows about it. He's been very involved in truck parking issues in Washington State, but this one is new to me. But I will certainly look at it. And you said it's north on I-5, just over the California-Oregon border.
It's about the 12-mile marker. When you're going north on I-5, you drop down the Ashland grade into Oregon, about the 12-mile marker. It's a big, beautiful, double-story. You know, it looks like a townhouse out there, and commercial trucks prohibited.
Okay, yeah, I'm not familiar with it. Lewie, any thought on that?
Oh, I think it's ridiculous. I mean, I when I was trucking, it used to irritate me to no end to pull in a rest area in the middle of the night, and there's a RV or something, camper hogging up the spots, and they camp out there all night. It's like you got campgrounds, you guys can go to Walmart. They can park in campers about anywhere and nobody messes with them. You can't do that with a truck. You know, it's like out there.
Walmart people are starting to lock you. I mean, you go into a Walmart anymore, they'll lock you up.
Yeah, that's just my point. But they allow campers to come in there and park.
Right.
You know, that's what irritates me. So why don't you campers go camp so us truckers can have the spots we need out on the road to get our rest?
Yeah, I know parking's been a problem. I did it for 42 years, and I'm retired now, but every time I drive by that rest area in Oregon, it just chaffs me no end.
Hey, James, I'm going to put you back in the queue. I'd like to get, I think I have your phone number, but Narita, who I think you talked with when you called in, maybe we can get your last name and make sure we have the right phone number and your email address so we can follow up with you after. I'll follow up with you probably next week or so after we've had a chance to take a look at that. So if that's okay with you, I'm going to put you back in the queue, and Narita can get your information, and I'll follow up with you shortly. Is that okay?
They should get at least a raspberry in the magazine.
Well, hopefully we'll give them more than that.
Well, you just gave us one to give it, so we'll pass it on. Don't worry, buddy. We'll see what we can do. Thank you.
Good.
Thank you for your membership.
Yeah, thank you, James.
And their call. Be safe.
And I want to add, too, while we're waiting for others to call in, you know, when we announced this show earlier in the week, we sent out an email essentially asking for feedback and comments and new ideas and old ideas and basically, any idea that someone has on how you can address truck parking. And I want to go through some of those real quick. And some of these are ones we've heard before. The suggestions that I got from members were commercializing rest areas, more parking in the median, right? And the examples that people used were what you would find on a toll road, right? A travel plaza. And that's there's a big difference between those types of facilities on a toll road and then on a regular interstate highway. The clover leafs, right? Those big roundabouts to get on and off the interstate. There are a couple places across the country that actually put gravel lots in those little those clover leaf areas where trucks can park, and I've seen that. Distribution centers, shippers and receivers should be required to provide adequate parking. Some people think it's not a responsibility of the government.
I find that an interesting point, and I'm I'm a little government guy. Let's put it that way. I don't like big government and all that stuff personally, but I'm just saying, it's the government's putting all these rules, all these regulations. The cops are the ones that's going to write you a ticket if you don't take your break when you're supposed to, or they're going to write you the ticket when you're parked where you're not supposed to be parked. So I guess my question, again, even though I'm a small government guy, why wouldn't this be partially the government's responsibility? I mean, let's face the facts. The government owns land and has, all this land around big cities, and a lot of places they have land that they own that they could put some gravel down and turn into a parking lot for trucks. Land around these big cities and stuff, truck stops can't afford it to build a truck stop there in the first place. The land's much too valuable for shopping or business or something like that other than trucking. That's why we see truck stops go away in urban areas. I mean, it's not a bit. Truck stops got to build out where the land isn't so much money. So the government, though, could surely take some of the land that they have and put in some parking areas. Or if nothing else, they could put some regulations. We all know that every little town seems to have an industrial park. The government should make a law. When you put in an industrial park, you have to put in a parking area there for, X amount of trucks that are going to be servicing that industrial park. So I guess that one kind of throws. I don't completely understand the thinking behind that.
Well, the other thing I would add too is, drivers and carriers pay a lot of truck taxes, right? I'd say more than their fair share.
More than their fair share.
That money goes to support a lot of other things that have nothing.
Good point. Would we rather the government pay for some parking or pay for rails for trails?
That's exactly right.
That's a very good point, Mike. I didn't even think of, but you brought up a very good point.
There are a few more issues that members suggested, and we can get into those a little later. I do want to get, though, bring this a little more local. And to start with that, Bryce, earlier in the week on Monday, there was a meeting in Effingham County, Georgia. There's a proposed truck stop at the I-16 and Old River Road exit, which I'm going to say is just a suburb of Savannah, Georgia. And basically, residents don't want it. They spoke out against it. And the zoning commission, I think, denied the application, though I honestly don't know how that process works there. But Bryce, I know you listened into that call, or into that meeting, I should say. What is your reaction or your analysis of that?
Yeah, so, and I do, I was listening into that, like you said. I think one of the things we don't quite know, that might not be the last word on this. This may go to another vote at the local level. So this may not be the end of it for this specific instance. But basically, I see both sides of the issue, especially when you listen into it at the local level. You hear about folks who are concerned. How is the truck stop going to affect their property? How close will it be to our properties? And so the one takeaway I had as I listened to it was, who was there to defend truckers or talk about the benefits or why really truck stops are necessary? So that's the one thing, if I'm kind of being frank, is I think the supporters of it and the business that was asking for the rezoning. I think, if this is something that we want to see expanded, we want to see truck parking expanded, people who are looking to do this need to make a good argument for it. One of the things that is disappointing, though, that I heard from a number of residents who spoke in opposition to rezoning to allow for this truck stop to go forward was, they talked about how they heard about, crime, prostitution, trash, all these things that are associated with truck stops. So I think that kind of gets back to the education that we've been trying to do on this issue. And I think that's why it is so important for our members and for truckers to speak up about this. There was one trucker who called in. She said she shared a letter with the county to kind of try and set the record straight and explain why this is really important for drivers to get rest. But I think my takeaway was kind of there needs to be more of that because, people, residents have their concerns, they have their preconceptions. And if the other side, if we aren't speaking up on this, that's what's going to stick with them. So I'd say that's what stuck out with me.
Hey, thank you, Bryce, for that. I appreciate that. And that goes on, play right back to my rant in the beginning of this show and when this started. It's our responsibility. It's responsibility of drivers. We have to take the responsibility of going to our local meetings when stuff like this is going on. I'm sure there's a bunch of truckers in Effingham County, Georgia. Them guys in Effingham, and I'm not trying to be critical, but they needed to be at this meeting to explain what life is like for a trucker, to explain what truckers need, because, again, all this horse crap about prostitution and all this craziness, that's what they use every time. That's what the people use. And when you don't have anybody there to counter the argument, then, I guess that's the truth.
Well, and Lewie,
taken as the truth.
I would say, too, that the crime and that stuff is, I think that's bogus opposition. It's easy to say that kind of stuff. Is it true? Not really, no. To me, it's just it's the not in my backyard, and that's the reasons that they use to kind of but
yeah, I don't disagree.
And I can empathize with
I get it. Okay, I understand what you're saying again. But everybody lives in one of them houses. I'm sure they want food and clothing and PlayStations and Apple telephones and all this other crap that we all want in our society, which is fine. But so you're going to have to deal with trucks because that's how it gets there. And people are going to have to start accepting the fact that we're going to have to put truck stops along these interstates and along these freeways and close to these cities. And it's kind of like a sticker I see around here. If you don't want trucks in your backyard, stop buying shit.
Yeah,
it's that
you go.
simple. Just don't buy nothing, and you won't have to worry about your damn trucks no more. But truckers need to get out there to these meetings when they're in your local area or try and put in a truck stop, and you need to set the record straight. Explain to people what you go through. Explain how you spend an hour or two a night trying to find a place to park just so you can sleep and be safe. Look at the tragedies that we've seen over the years. Some guys not being parked in safe places to them or to whatever. This is just crazy.
Absolutely. And Bryce, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I just think to Louie's point, one of the board members, I believe, at the end kind of said he had heard from the woman who submitted the letter. The trucker submitted a letter. He said, I understand truckers, they need to get rest. We want them to be rested and we want them to be safe. But basically, we just don't think this is the spot for it. So in a lot of words, it's what you said, Mike, what kind of Louie just said, not here, not in my backyard.
Well, and looking at that community,
recognize the problem.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's a very small community. And I'm going to say, and Todd Spencer actually made this point earlier in the week, that that community probably wouldn't want any development at that location, right? Mm-hmm. It just happens to be a truck stop this time, but they would probably oppose any sort of development, period. And I can see that. So anyways, we have 2 callers lined up. When we come back, we're going to take those calls, take those questions and comments. Again, the number to call in is 317-676-6432. That's 317-676-6432.
Every time you turn the key, you hope you've crossed your I's and dotted your T's. Because the last thing you want to be is non-compliant with the DOT. Fortunately, there's OOIDA. It's like spell check for truckers. Federal regulations? Check. Lease agreements and warranties? Check. Permits, drug and alcohol testing? Check and check. Go to OOIDA.com because your job is to drive. Our job is to help with everything else.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back. We have just 13 or 14 minutes left, so
I'm only going to spend 13 more minutes with you. God, there is a God.
We're going to go to Doug in Utah. Doug, if you can hear us, how you doing, man? You're on the line.
Well, good. It's good to hear another episode. And my point that I would like to make is we talk about it's against the law. Why can't we change that law to have federal highway right-of-ways used for parking? Now, let me point out the National Park Service has in-holdings there or possessory interest of the concessionaires, like the Yellowstone Park Company and all those people there. They don't own anything, but they're on federal property conducting business, and every 30 years or less, they have a contract to bid for, and they get to bid with all the other concessionaires that want to do business there. Why can't the big truck stop operators bid to the federal government to say, yeah, we want to open up fuel stop here? And really, when it comes down to it, all we really want is a gravel lot. We're okay with that. Like you talk about those clover leaves, especially around I-76, I-80 there in Nebraska. Big old parking lot. And we don't need everything else that goes with a parking place. We just need a place to park. I was working into a traffic jam here inside the Love's parking lot, Malvern, and I got the last parking spot. What a lucky dog am I? And it's
Malvern,
only,
Arkansas?
Yeah.
Some people have all the
Why
luck.
can't, some of our legislators that listen to us and introduce bills, let us get them to champion a change in that law. We're not going to take away commercial opportunity from the existing operators. We're going to expand their opportunities. We're going to give them more places to do business.
Doug, I'm going to say this, and then I'll turn it over to Bryce. My answer is that it's not necessarily prohibited to build some kind of gravel parking lot on the on an interstate highway, and including kind of the median in between. And there are certainly wide enough spots all over the place where you could fit, put a gravel lot in. The challenge is there's no money to do that, and the only way that a place like that would be financially sustainable is if there was some business, selling something, paying some kind of tax that would support that. That's the issue. But Bryce, is that anything? Did I get that, or did I miss something?
I
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bryce.
No, I was just going to say it's an interesting idea. I don't know, if how DOT would have an interest in doing that. I think Mike is kind of right in that, being able to pay for it and sustain it would be a concern. But at the same time, kind of as we've gotten back around to this, talking about the reason there are such parking problems because of federal regulations, rest break requirements, and everything else. So the federal government really should have an interest in addressing it. So I know that the DOT working group on truck park has put out kind of creative uses of truck parking and has pointed out uses with things like really for an existing right of way. So, maybe this is something that we could pursue a little more or look at more to see if it's something they're interested in, or if they're not interested in it, to figure out why they wouldn't be.
And Doug, I also want to add, one of our members replied earlier. It was either earlier today or yesterday. I honestly can't remember. And basically pointed out a couple locations. The one in western Nebraska, I think on I-80, where they did park a little gravel lot in one of the clover leaves. And then on I-80 west of Cheyenne in Wyoming, there are two locations at least that I know of now that our member pointed out to me where I think the state or the local, I don't know, I would assume the state put down gravel lots adjacent to existing truck stops. So the biggest expense being the land, which presumably is already state or city owned, and literally just threw down some gravel. And the Google Earth pictures I saw of it, there were trucks parked there, and that stuff's not very expensive. So there are options. And Doug, I'll turn it over to you. I'll give you the last word.
Well, Wyoming's very truck friendly. That way, they got the lower fuel taxes, and they really do make some big parking lots. But where else are they going to put people when they shut down the freeway? So I think maybe part of it's driven by a need to herd trucks into a spot. They also fill up fairgrounds, and for what they've got to work with, they do a fabulous job. I salute Cowboy State in that regard. And thanks for all you guys do.
Hey, Doug, before you leave, I got a quick question. Yeah. Is this the same Doug Smith I know from Utah that works for Ralph Smith Trucking? Because this is the first. I think it's the first time I've ever heard you say how friendly Wyoming is to truckers. But maybe that's a story for another day.
That's a good question. Don't Google Doug Smith, the Ralph Smith Company in Evanston, Wyoming. You'll come up with a Landlight article about my arrest.
Well, I just thought of that when you said that. But anyway, thanks for calling, Doug, and tell your boss, man, Harry, I said hello.
Thanks, guys.
Yep. See you, Doug. All right. We have a little over 7 minutes left. We have another call. Jesse from Wisconsin. Jesse, if you can hear me, you're on the line. How you doing this evening?
Good.
Awesome.
Hi, Jesse.
Well, go ahead with your question or comment.
Well, we go to these Walmarts, and if they don't want us parking there, they let the RVs park there. Just stop bringing their products to them. And a lot of these places got big parking lots. To stop bringing their products, they'll start having to let us park there. When you run out of hours, you run out of hours. That's the problem with this state now, this country. Nobody's standing up for us truck drivers.
I don't disagree with you, but we're standing up for truckers, but I agree with you.
You do, but I mean,
I agree with you on the Walmarts and a lot of these other places like that. They've got the room. They got the place to let you park in there, take your rest, especially when it's their fault that they kept you there for 6 or 7 hours and you're out of hours. I mean, I heard it brought up at CVSA last month or whatever we went. The cops were bringing up how guys are running out of hours while they're DOTing them and doing inspections. So they either have to escort them somewhere and make them sit at the scale house for 10 hours. And one officer even brought up that maybe they need to come up with an exemption or something. If that happens to you, you can go to the next safe place to park. And unfortunately, law enforcement, they wanted nothing to do with that. Who cares? But you're right. I know when I had my truck, I tried real hard. If somebody didn't treat me fairly or treat me right at a shipper or a receiver, I just tried to never go back. Once in a while I had to if it was to get me home or something like that, but I just didn't go back. Or they paid a lot more money the next time I went. That was my theory.
Hey, Jesse, are there any Walmarts that do let you park? It's always been my understanding that some do. Most don't, but some do. Is that accurate, or do you have a different...
Yeah, you get someone will let you, and then they will. I mean, even like Quick Trips now, they're starting to making it places to park. Well, now they're parking their trucks here and taking like 10 spots up. I mean, that's just kind of defeating the purpose for all of us coming in, buying fuel and buying stuff there. For them guys to park their own carriers there.
It's funny because we've reached out to Walmart about this in the past and why some do and some don't. And we're told, I assume this is true, but we're always told, well, it isn't Walmart's policy. It's the company they lease the property and the building from. But with that being said, we all know that Walmart has enough power that they could pretty much get anything they wanted put in their lease, I'm sure. So if they wanted to allow trucks to park at a Walmart store, I'm sure they could get that put in their lease. I mean, what big landlord isn't going to rent to a Walmart?
Well, and the other thing I want to add to that
That's
is,
just like Menards. See, we go to Menards too and deliver. They don't like us parking overnight there. You get there, you get down in Chicago area. Where the heck you really park?
Exactly.
So they get mad when we come in early or come in late and park, and it's just getting to be ridiculous. So
and parking at Walmart would make me a little nervous because there's more than one location that I've heard about where they actually tow companies will come in and boot you for parking there, and it's very expensive to get that stuff off, and you have basically no recourse. I've even heard of what I call drive-away tows at a Walmart location up in New Jersey or Pennsylvania. I can't remember which, but maybe both. So yeah, that comes with its own pitfalls of parking somewhere like that where you're not really sure if you can park there or not, and to have to deal with that day in and day out is just, it's unimaginable. So, Jesse, thank you so much for calling in. I'm going to give you the last word if you want it.
no, that's all I need.
Awesome. Well, have a great night. Appreciate you calling in.
Be safe out there, Jesse. Thank you, my friend.
Thank you. Bye.
So speaking of roses and raspberries, we had someone mention that, and
I'm a rose and you're a raspberry.
yeah, that's probably true. But I want to use one more example, and this is close to OOIDA. We have 3 minutes left. Cameron, Missouri, which is on I-35. About an hour south of the Iowa border. I can't remember exactly where it is. It's roughly exit 50 or 60 there.
Would it be about halfway between Kansas City and Iowa?
It could be, yeah. That sounds about right.
I'm not familiar, but I'm just asking.
It's close enough, and they already have a couple of truck stops at what I'll call the North Cameron exit. On the South Cameron exit, there's nothing there except a hospital, Cameron Regional Medical Center, whatever they call it, and there was a truck stop that is, I think they already broke ground on it. The city is basically, or the community of the hospital is suing to stop it. They use some bogus, I don't have time to read it all, but here again is the situation where a truck stop is trying to develop, land, and the community, at least in this case, the hospital, doesn't want it. So they come up with these kind of bogus opposition talking points, when in reality, it just boils down to a NIMBY, right? They just don't want it there. And that's the problem is there's too many places where truck stops just aren't wanted. It makes sense, in my opinion, to have these things on the interstate. And I would suspect that most drivers would probably like that better too, because getting off and on an exit is, why would you want to get off at a busy interchange and try to find truck parking and deal with all those cars? I mean, to me, it just would be easier if you didn't have to get off the interstate that much. You could park on it, like these travel plazas we see on toll roads, except without the tolls, of course. So anyways, that's my rant, I guess. Bryce, we have about a minute left. I'll give you 20, 30 seconds, and then I'll let Lewie have the last word. But anything that you want to add, Bryce?
I want to reiterate what Lewie said about getting in touch with your member of Congress about this truck parking issue or issues that are important to you. I've worked on Capitol Hill as well, and I know that it doesn't seem complicated, but if you're persistent, check in every once in a while and make sure that they're not forgetting about the thing you told them about, especially on something that like truck parking that should be non-controversial and straightforward. That's how we can get things done. So, don't be afraid to reach out to them and, keep that up in their ear about these issues.
Yeah, remind them that the head of the Transportation Committee was promised this truck parking, and we didn't get it. When we talked to him, we were promised it, but we didn't get it. But as for me, all I got to say is thank you, drivers, for what you're doing. You're doing a wonderful job out there. We at OOIDA love you. And if you are a member, then thank you. And if you're not a member, join. And if you are a member, get your friends to join. Be safe, and thank you for everything you do out there.
We'll be back in 2 weeks. We'll have information on our topic and guests shortly, so stay tuned. Check out the websites. Thank you for everything you do. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Keep the shiny side up.
That's right.
Thank you for joining us today. Live from Exit 24 was brought to you by the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association and our technical crew, Barry Spillman, Nate Kelly, and Jim Fetzer. If you aren't a member yet, call our main number during business hours to join, and that number is 816-229-5791, or you can just go to our website at ooida.com.
You guys were good. Lewie, I'm glad you sound good. I was worried that you were going to be weak or something, but man, I mean, you guys just nailed it. Knocked it out of the park. Well, hopefully this one gets more watches on.
Barry, I don't know why you keep questioning.
Exactly.
I'm the guy with the T-shirt.
Yeah, no shit. I don't even have it. He sings a little song for me, though. Barry is the best.